question. Let's start very beginning.
Yes.
Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? What was your childhood?
Okay, I was born here in Lisbon. I was born in Lisbon with my parents. We stayed here the first 2 years of my life. Dad was transferred, promoted. We went to Salem for like 13 years. And then when I was 15, went to North Canton, where I graduated from high school. And then from North Canton, I went to undergrad at Walsh University. I started my master's at Georgetown. It was in political science. I wanted to be a diplomat, and then I met too many diplomats and realized I couldn't do it. I quit Georgetown, took like a year and a half off, and I finished my master's at the University of London. And from there, I started traveling a lot.
Okay. Couple things based off that.
Yes.
You said transferred, promoted to Salem.
Yes, okay, he was with East Ohio Gas at the time.
Who's he?
My father,
Okay.
yes. So he was, I'm sorry, let me ask the question. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. The promoted part, is that what you're asking me to re-ask?
Yeah, I mean, no, I thought, I wasn't sure what you meant. Oh, okay.
No, we're good. So your dad got promoted, you went to Salem for X amount of years, and then you went to North Canton where you graduated high school.
Yes.
What was your undergrad in?
My undergrad, I had a triple major. Yeah, I was kind of, I don't know, I sounds like I'm a super nerd, but I had history, international studies, and English lit.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was typical liberal arts. I was kind of like ambitious. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Then you went to Georgetown.
Yes.
You realized you didn't want to be a diplomat.
Yes.
And what was your degree in when you went to London?
Again, in poli-sci, but at Georgetown I started a program in Masters in Foreign Service. It was like geared for training of diplomats and all that. And then at University of London, it was the School of Slavonic and East European Studies. So this was in 78, 79, so I was studying communism. My degree was in East European political systems. Yes, because I spoke Russian. I mean, I studied Russian and stuff like that. So that's, yes. So that's why, yes.
And then plus you had the Cold War going on at that time.
Exactly. At that time, communism was like a big, it was, a lot of people were studying it. So I thought, I could be a researcher, journalist, something like that. So.
Okay. You graduated from London.
Yes.
Then what?
I graduated from London, and when I was in London, I applied for a scholarship for a summer program at the Catholic University in Poland, in Lublin, Poland. And so I thought, hey, it's Eastern Europe. This is why I'm studying. Received a scholarship to go there for 2-3 months, and loved it. I'm not Polish. My mother was Romanian heritage. My father English, German. But the Poles gave me a scholarship. I went there, had a really interesting time, learned the language, a bit of the language, culture. I thought, I definitely want to come back.
Okay. Did you go back?
Yes, I did. But first, I came back to the States, got a job, my first journalistic job at the Canton, Ohio Repository. And I was there for 2 years. And during that time, the Solidarność movement started in Poland, which was the first free trade union in a communist country. And I thought, I want to be a foreign correspondent. And I thought, I definitely need to go to a country where something's going to happen. And just from my studies, I realized you can't have a free trade union in a communist country. They will have to suppress it. I want to be there when it happens. And so I received a scholarship to study in Poland for 2 years. Went there 3 months after I arrived. The crackdown began. We had martial law. They outlawed Solidarność. They jailed Lech Walesa. All civil liberties were squashed. So I was at the right place at the right time, and I was writing. I was getting articles published about my experiences.
Who were you working for at that time?
I just freelancing. I continued to freelance. I had 1 or 2 articles published in the repository, but I was freelancing for the papers in the States, Philadelphia, Detroit, things like that.
Okay. So obviously being at a place where internationally everything's going on, that's got to get some eyeballs on you.
Oh, yes. I mean, yes.
Did anything come of that afterwards?
It's interesting because after I came back to the States, after Poland, I mean, I was there for 2 years. I took off 9 months to go to travel around the world. I basically went through 6 countries. when I travel, I like to take my time. So I ended up spending a couple months in Greece, a couple months in Turkey, and the next thing I know, a couple months in Israel. And I've only, 9 months, I've only gone to 4 countries. So I thought, I don't, and Dad was getting sick. So I came back to the States, and I answered an ad in the newspaper for research analyst, something like that. And of course, it was for the CIA. And they wanted, it was CIA or National Security Agency. Besides, I spoke Polish, was fluent in Polish, I had studied Russian. But I said no. So I said, I'm not going that route. So I stayed in journalism.
Okay. Why did you not want to do that?
It's just that, that's a good question. I know why. Because when I did go for 1 or 2 interviews with the CIA or National Security Agency. I forget now which one it was. Maybe both of them. But anyway, they told me if I would be hired by them, I would have to curtail all contact with my friends in Poland, because Poland was still communist at the time, and they said if you become if you work for us, you have to sever all ties with your friends. And I had really good friends in Poland, and my roommate. I was his best man at his wedding. And I had really strong friendships, and the idea of cutting everybody, saying goodbye, ciao, it's like, I didn't want to do that.
Okay.
So.
So
it was interesting. It would have been a very challenging job. They would, but then I didn't want to do it, give up on my friends. So.
You went back into journalism, you said, right?
Yes. Yes.
Where'd you go?
Okay, I came back from Poland. It was in the States. We thought my father had liver cancer. So I was in the States for maybe 6 months. I tried to get back to the repository. They said no. And so I applied for a bunch of jobs, and I was offered a job in Saudi Arabia, Montgomery, Alabama, covering George Wallace, the former governor, and then a paper in Ohio. And my parents really wanted me to stay in the States. And I told them, okay, I'll go to Alabama. I'll take the job in Alabama. Really interesting job is at the Advertiser, which at the time was a really good newspaper, covering George Wallace, amazing. And then I told my parents that night, in the morning, I wake up, Dad's downstairs making breakfast, and he says, Peter, go to Saudi Arabia. You really want to do that, So that's what I did. I went to Saudi Arabia, working for an English language Saudi newspaper called the Saudi Gazette, and I was there for 4 years. And it was it was an amazing experience for a journalist. It was just amazing.
Okay. What were some of the big topics you covered when you were in Saudi Arabia?
Okay, but there was, at the time, this was before the Gulf Wars, so there was only 1, 2, 3 Western journalists in Saudi Arabia at the time. At the time, access to the kingdom was very curtailed, so there was only 3 of us. So I would cover world leaders would come in all the time into Saudi Arabia to visit the king and the princes, what have you. And it was just amazing. The people I met, the experiences I had. Also, I covered oil a little bit. Oil, obviously. But for the most part, it was like covering the royal family, what government, things what happened in the government, looking at the expatriate life, things like that. Had a great boss. One of my best bosses as a journalist was a Saudi. Was my boss at the Saudi Gazette.
Okay.
So.
You mentioned your father said go to Saudi Arabia.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Was he dying at that time?
No, he wasn't. It was a misdiagnosis. The Cleveland Clinic made a mistake. He didn't have liver cancer, so he recovered. But so that's why I went to Saudi Arabia. He had recovered. Sorry, he had recovered. So it was like everything was cool.
Okay. So you didn't have to worry about that. Now you
Right.
spent 4 years in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Next step of the page.
Next step of the page. I came back to the States, and so I went to Cincinnati, where as a journalist in Saudi Arabia, I had started my first book. So I was writing a book, and I returned to Cincinnati, where my brother was living, close to my parents, but not too close. And my brother lived in Cincy. I thought this is a good place to finish my book. Finished my book. It was sold and was published. I sold it to a publisher, and so that was like for about 2 years. And then I had a chance to go to Brazil. It was like, for a job, whatever, but I had a chance to go to Brazil for something, just chance. Something came up. I thought, why not? So I went to Brazil, not speaking Portuguese, and not speaking Spanish. It was in Brazil for 1 year, freelancing, and then Brazilian economy collapsed, work dried up, prices. There was 10,000% inflation on a monthly basis. So as soon as I was paid in local currency, I would spend it all immediately on food, because the next day prices would go up by 5,000%. So it's like one of those situations. I thought, I love Brazil. Brazil is amazing. I lived in Sao Paulo, but I traveled throughout the country, great time. And so then I had a chance after Brazil to go to Venezuela. So that's where I went to Venezuela in 1992. 2 months after I got there, there was a coup d'etat. So like I'm barely speaking Spanish. My Portuguese was pretty good, but I mean, you can get by so they're similar. So I'm like, there's a coup. I heard these explosions outside my apartment building. So I thought, I thought it was jets, breaking the sound barrier, what have you. So I went down got the dog, went downstairs, down to the corner kiosk to buy the newspaper, and the vendor was saying, get home, this is a coup d'etat. There's people dying out here, they're shooting. And so I went back to my apartment, and yes, I lived pretty close to the military airport, and these planes were flying right over, and some of them were very low flying. I could see the pilots. And I and my neighbors were up on the balconies watching the battle for the government take place. And it's like, I called my parents, and my mother just said, like, oh my God, every place you go, something happens. So I said, yeah, it's not planned, but anyway, so I was in Caracas, Venezuela for about 15 years. I eventually took a job with Bloomberg, was with Bloomberg for 11 years. Started out as the local correspondent for Bloomberg, and then I promoted to different positions, and I was then for a short time, a year or two, head of South American news coverage for the company. Then my mother took ill, and so I gave that up to, my mother wanted to die at home, so she was in a hospice situation, so I couldn't be a boss. But what was happening was I'd go to the States for 2 weeks, take care of my mom, go back to Venezuela for a week, and then go down to Brazil or Argentina for a week. So I thought, after 3 months of that, and trying to direct the news coverage and all this, I thought, there's no way I can do this. And my mother came first. So I told the company that they had to relieve me of my managerial duties, which they took them about a couple more months to do so, and I had threatened to quit the company completely, and they finally did. As soon as I did this, my mother went into remission. So she didn't die, and I was out of job as a manager, but it's just as well.
All right, so little to unpack there.
Yes.
Your first when you were the local correspondent.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That was under Bloomberg, right?
Yes, but I had been freelancing before.
You were freelancing
Yes.
that whole time before?
Yes, I was freelancing for The Economist, for Time Magazine, for Business Week, a bunch of magazines and newspapers.
How did you come across Bloomberg?
Bloomberg, actually, because the correspondent, my predecessor, she went on vacation, and she asked me to fill in for a week 2 weeks when she was away. So I did that. I thought, just an experience. At that time, Bloomberg in '94 was not well known, and in fact, I had to look them up. I thought, I never heard of Bloomberg myself. So it was a wire service. I thought, I like their style, and in '94, my father had just died. I was really close to my father, and the first year I was a disaster. I just was really missed him. I was crying all the time, and Bloomberg, I thought, if I get out of the house, so freelancing, I was freelancing out of the house. So I was in the house with my own thoughts 24/7. Once I started Bloomberg, I stopped crying. It's like it put me a different perspective. I thought my father wouldn't want me to do this anyway, to cry all the time. So I thought Bloomberg, they offered me the job. They flew me up to New York for the interviews, and they offered me the job. So it's like after 1 week, 2 weeks, of like having filled in for them, and it was a great job. I was there for 11 years. And for the most part, it was a really enjoyable experience.
Okay, so just let me make sure I get this straight.
Mm-hmm.
Your predecessor went on vacation, and just because you filled in, they liked what you did.
Yes.
Brought you up for an interview.
Yes. Oh, I had to do a written test in Caracas, which that's what you do. You do a written test first, and then at that time they were flying any new employee up to New York to do the interview with the head of the news division, plus international editor, plus the Latin American editor. So I had those three. But I just passed the written test, went for the, I think it was, I forget, it was an oral, maybe there was a phone interview involved, I forget, in Caracas. And then they flew me up to New York for the main interviews.
Okay.
So
The time you spent under Bloomberg, I know we
Yes.
talked about the coup. Was there anything big? What is some of the biggest stories at that time?
we had okay. There's another coup. We had two coups, in fact, during my Bloomberg years. We had a coup when Chavez was overthrown, and that was in 2004, I think. Yes, it was after 2004, and then within 3 days there was a counter coup. So we were having all this fighting right outside my office building. Someone tried to put a car bomb in the cellar of in the parking garage, and we had thousands of people outside, some for Chavez and some against Chavez. So that was one of the big stories. Also in 99, we had that big mudslide that killed 20,000 people along the Venezuelan coast. We had a bank collapse. We had bank collapses like what happened here in 2008 in the States. There's one in Venezuela. It was never monotonous. Every day was something new. Every day was like a new experience. Was something. I think the news up here is crazy sometimes. Down there was even worse as regards craziness, but it was fascinating. I got to see Hugo Chavez, his first coup. His coup in '92 when I arrived in Venezuela. '95 he was elected president. He took office in '97. Yes. So it's like, anyway, long story short, but it's like I was here for all the really interesting events, watching one of Latin America's richest countries become a basket case because of government policies. It was their revolution basically destroyed the country, economically, politically, socially.
Okay.
So a lot of big stories.
Give me the time frame. You got there in what, 92 you said?
92, yes.
When did you come back?
Came back in 2016.
2016.
Yes.
Okay, so that would be, what, 20...
It's about 25 years.
25 years.
Yes.
Okay. Why?
I came back because in 2015, at the end of 2015, I was kidnapped. I'd quit Bloomberg in 2006. I was 52 at the time, and I thought I knew I could freelance because I had a lot of contacts. I thought I can continue freelancing, but I definitely want to stay in the country, see what happens with Chavez, see what the politics, what happens with the political situation. But everyone has told me that to know the real Venezuela, you have to live in the countryside. So I thought, hey, I'm gonna do that. So I found a coffee ranch outside Caracas, maybe 80 minutes outside Caracas, and I bought a coffee ranch. It was a small coffee farm. It's like 4 acres or so, and with maybe 1,000, 2,000 coffee bushes. And so I thought, that's what I want to do. I had a beautiful location, 4,500 foot above sea level. My house was at the base, at the peak of a valley. So the views were amazing. I lived right beside a cloud forest. So we had ocelots and monkeys and toucans and sloths and just amazing. And it was out in the midst of nowhere. And I definitely got an introduction to real Venezuelan life, which is what I wanted. I could continue freelancing. I learned how to process coffee, how to grow coffee, and I had a big organic farm, and I had chickens and stuff like that. And it was a different experience. I would say I'm someone who doesn't buy a lot, but I prefer to buy experiences. I like to collect experiences. So I put myself in a different country, wherever I've been, I always try to go native as much as possible, so I can see, live, feel what it means to be a citizen of that country.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is mid-2000s you did
Yes.
this?
Yes.
Okay. Obviously you said something that stuck off the page. You were kidnapped.
Yeah.
Do you care to talk about that?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me a bit. I'm not up here now. If I were down there, I might think twice about it. But yeah, I was kidnapped. It was maybe 2 weeks before Christmas of that year, 2015. And I was returning home. My car was full of Christmas presents and Christmas food and all that stuff. And my house was, like I say, 4,500 foot above sea level. It's up a mountain road, like, hairpin turns. I passed one hairpin turn, and there was 4 people in the road, all with guns pointed at me. I had maybe 25 yards to react, and I thought, do I run them over? I thought, that's not going to work. And so I just stopped the car. I thought, as long as I'm at Bloomberg, we had training what to do when you're robbed at gunpoint or what to do when you're kidnapped. So thankfully for me, my kidnapping my kidnapping training kicked in, and because they had the element of surprise, they had their guns pointed at me. I didn't own a gun, and I thought if I run them over, probably be able to hit 1 or 2 of them, but there's 2 left with 2 with guns. And I thought I just played it cool, and it worked out well. So I mean, they didn't. Well, they threatened me and they put guns to my head. I had, you have shotguns right at your temples. It does give you a different perspective on life. But I had already been robbed once or twice before in Caracas at gunpoint. So I mean, I was more or less used to it, or like it was not. My first time when I was robbed at gunpoint in Caracas was. It was a little bit scarier than being kidnapped, because the kidnapping, I had already gone through something similar. Kidnapping, I thought, if I just be cool, if I don't challenge them, if I don't resist, they're not going to kill me. And thankfully, that's what happened. What only concerned me was that they knew where I lived, because they were actually from the village where I lived. So I was just concerned that they might take my keys and kill my groundskeeper, or kill my dogs, or just rip my house apart, whatever. But I didn't think, I thought as long as I was calm, they wouldn't kill me.
Okay. So they had those guns pointing to your head.
Yes.
Did they take you anywhere, or did they just take
Yes, they took me off the road. They took the car, pulled the car off, and took it down to their hiding place. They left me with 2 of them, and they pushed me into the woods. I mean, like maybe half a mile, even probably less, quarter of a mile from the road into an old coffee plantation. And they just forced me on the ground, put me on the ground, and my head's, my belly's on the ground, so my head's looking into the ground, and it's like ants were on me, and it's like the ground was all wet. It had just rained. It was muddy. And I thought, oh Lord, what do you do? And the thing was, they had not frisked me properly. I mean, they just assumed. I always carried 2 phones with me, because I knew there was kidnappings in the region. I knew that these things happened. So I always carried 2 phones, one for show, which they found because I was in my car, and I always kept a phone hidden in my sock. So I had a phone in my sock, and I kept thinking, if they don't pay too much attention, I can maybe call for help. But then I thought, who am I going to call? You don't call the police in Venezuela, because they were probably involved in it. The police in Venezuela are very corrupt. So some of the policemen would actually rent their guns to criminals, expect a cut of the proceeds. So I had no idea if these kids had received their guns from the police. So I thought, who do I call? I thought, who am I going to call? My neighbors? My neighbors aren't going to risk their lives for me. I lived up in my house. I lived by myself. I had a groundskeeper, but he lived in his cabin down the way. So I thought, who am I going to call? No one. But I thought, bloody A, if they see my phone, then I'd think, I thought if they do another search on me, they're going to find that phone, and then they're going to be really upset. Because I told them I didn't have another phone.
So how long until they release you?
A couple hours. They realized no one would pay my ransom. They realized that, hey, this gringo, this North American, who are we going to call for? Who are we going to demand ransom from? Because in Venezuela, your family pays it, or your company. I was unemployed. I was retired. I had my little coffee ranch, but I wasn't working for anyone legitimately. My neighbors, I lived in a very small community. My neighbors were humble people. They were, I would say, middle class, lower middle class, but they didn't have money. They didn't have money to pay my ransom. So after a couple hours, the kidnappers said, hey, what we're going to do is we'll release you, and you're going to pay us a ransom to get your car back. I said, hey, I can deal with that. So they let me go, and it took me 2 days to raise the money. They kidnapped me on a Friday, so banks were closed. And in Venezuela, ATMs run out of money really quickly. So there's no way I could they wanted me, a couple thousand. at the official exchange rate to get my car back. And the thing is, at that time in Venezuela, there was no cars to be bought. We were in the midst of an economic crisis. There was nothing to buy. So my car, even though it was like 10 years old, just the thought of replacing it, I thought, oh Lord, because I had my chickens, I had my dogs, how would I get off that mountain? How do I bring food back up? How do I get, So I thought, hey, I'm willing to get my car back. I'll pay whatever they want.
Okay. So, do you know why they attacked you specifically? Or
No. Because the thing was, in the village, I worked for the school. I was a volunteer. I did a lot of volunteer stuff. We had a soup kitchen, volunteered for that. I taught English at the elementary school as a volunteer, what have you. So people knew I was a volunteer. I was involved in the community. And I said, and they told me when I was on the ground with my face down, they said, you're not the one we wanted to kidnap. We're waiting to kidnap your neighbor. She's Venezuelan. She has a bigger car than you do, but we got tired of waiting. So we saw you coming up. That's why we decided, to kidnap you. So that's the only reason why they did it. So I was not their first choice. They didn't think I had a lot of money. In Venezuela, I always dressed down, no jewelry, and had a really cheap cell phone. So I mean, people thought they knew I was an American, obviously, but they did not know. I tried to keep it humble.
So that whole experience happens.
Yes.
You move back here to the States.
Yes. After that happened, I thought, if I don't get out now, I will probably be re-kidnapped. I will probably be, something else will happen. Maybe next time the gun will accidentally go off. Maybe next time they'll start beating me, which was their MO. They used to beat people up sometimes, depending on if they fought back and stuff. I thought, I have to get out of here. If my parents were alive, they'd be saying, get out now. So I put my house up for sale. It took 9 months to sell my house. Actual sale took place really quickly. Within a month, I had it sold. It took 8 months to do all the legal procedures. And all this time, I had to go up and down the mountain thinking, oh, these kids could kidnap me again. Every time I went down the mountain, I thought, bloody A, is it gonna happen again or not?
Okay. So, how long after you sell that house do you move back?
Okay. The kidnapping in December 2015. I moved back to Lisbon in September 2016.
Why Lisbon? Out of all the 1,000 places you have been.
Yes, Lisbon's home. And I was funny because it's something emotional. It's not logical. It's not logical why I chose Lisbon. It's emotional. This is where I was born. This was where my grandparents were. My parents were from Lisbon. And wherever I was throughout wherever I was in the world, whenever I came back to the States, I always had to come to Lisbon. And to see we still had cousins here, my aunts and uncles, but it's just that Lisbon's part of my life. And I thought, if I'm coming back to the States, I haven't lived in the States. I haven't really lived in the States for more than 2 decades. I thought, if I'm coming back, it has to be Lisbon. So before I moved back to Lisbon, I came up maybe the month before, looked at real estate, found nothing. Came back in September, found a house immediately. By October 1st, I had the house, I had the car, and I was in Lisbon.
Okay. So, how long, you come in September of 2016.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You immediately, less than a year, you're in city council, correct?
I was about 14 months later, I was elected to city council. And yes, it was fast.
How'd you make that jump so quickly, just coming back?
When I first came back, as I said, my family was here, but most of them had left or had died. So my aunts and uncles were almost all dead. My cousins, for the most part, were away. I had moved away. I didn't know that many people in Lisbon, so I thought I wanted to get involved in the community. So I started attending village council meetings. And at that time, there weren't that many visitors I just started seeing what was happening in the village. And one day I was walking my dog, and the former mayor saw me walking. He says, why are you attending council meetings? I said, I just came back. I like to see what's happening in the community. And he said, do you want to be on the board of public zoning board? And I thought, yeah, I could do that. Why not? So I was appointed in January. I'd been back for 3 months, 4 months, and was appointed to the board of the zoning appeals board. So I continued continued attending council meetings, and the more I saw at council, the more I thought, Peter, you could probably make a positive contribution if you got more involved by running for council. Because, yes, I had not lived here forever, and I admit it. And I told that to voters too. Hey, I was born here, but I brought a fresh perspective. I had lived elsewhere and seen what works, what programs, what ideas worked elsewhere. And I thought, Lisbon, we have so much to offer. We have so much potential. Beautiful downtown, historic downtown. We're on the major bicycle trail, and we're the county seat. But all those assets, for whatever reason, they're not being realized to their full potential. And it was kind of upsetting. I thought, this is my village too. Okay, granted, I had just parachuted in, got it. I understand that. But that's, in my mind, I had never left Lisbon. That emotional link was always there. And I saw where my village was going. I thought, I think I can help.
Okay. So this is 2017 that
Yes.
you became city council.
Yes, I was elected 2017, took office 2018.
Okay. Then let's jump ahead to where we are today.
Yes.
You come November, right?
Yes.
Past November.
I was elected.
You were elected mayor. In that time between city council and mayor,
Mm-hmm.
did the community really kind of grasp who Pete Wilson is, and kind of you like, especially social media wise, you made your name out there. I am a village leader. Have the community, was there like what's the word I'm looking for, like, in that short amount of time, a strong representation of Pete Wilson?
I think in the beginning, when I was elected councilman, what amazes me is, because I think local government, I think government in general should be accessible and should be transparent. And so I started my blog on, Facebook page, Peter Wilson, Lisbon Councilman, and what I started doing was publishing the agenda of each council meeting and also the results of each council meeting. A very, very bare bones, objective, bare bone account of what happened. That had never been done before. And I think that resonated with many people. I think people have a right to know what's going on in the village. Sometimes I'm not faulting or not blaming my predecessors, but sometimes I think decisions were made without really involving the community, without the community knowing full well what was happening. Sometimes local government, not only in Lisbon, but and wherever, sometimes it's like we forget to listen to people. We forget to listen to the voters. We forget to listen to the residents. So I thought, and also as a journalist, I believe in transparency. That's key. I think people have a right to know. So that's why I started doing it. I thought people have a right to know. And as I continued my blog or whatever, my page, people started coming to me with their issues. And I made a real point of trying to resolve those issues. I listen. I think people want to be listened to. If you have a complaint, whatever, hey, my office is open. I'm a part-time mayor. I get paid $8,000 a year, and my predecessors they didn't have regular office hours. I'm here Monday through Friday for anyone to come in and talk to me about problems, issues, whatever, and I will try to deal with them. I will try to resolve them. I will try to fix things or fix a problem, and I think in the past that might have been lacking.
Okay. Were you surprised when you won? When you decided to run?
I was surprised I ran. When I ran for council, I'd only been here for a year, and the thing was, even though I'd gone door to door, and even though I had immersed myself in the community, like volunteering and things like that, I didn't think I was going to win when I ran for council. When I ran for mayor, I thought it was because when I ran for mayor, all my colleagues on council, most of them did not, none of them supported me. So they all had my opponent's signs in their yards. So it was like, and that was part of being on council too. When I was on village council, it was basically everything I proposed was being shot down 5 votes to 1, 5 votes to 1. So it just that So I thought, well, they're all like, I mean, it was an uphill fight. But I think what helped me was, first, I listened to people. Secondly, I went door to door, meeting people, meeting the voters. I went to every house, almost every house in Lisbon, asking for their support with a message that, look, we can be doing better. I mean, the status quo, I mean, there's no sense in throwing the old, same solutions at problems if those solutions have never worked. If something's not worked in 20 years, there's a good chance it's not going to be working in the next 20 years. I came in, I promised a fresh approach to government, a fresh approach, fresh ideas. And I think that resonated with many voters. So I was surprised I won as mayor, but I mean, I was a little bit more confident when I ran for mayor than when I ran for council.
Okay. So, what do you see now that we're about seven months into you being a mayor? What do you see for the future?
Future of Lisbon, I mean, it just so much depends on COVID-19. I was mayor for 3 months. Well, actually 2.5 months. If you go mid-March is when COVID-19 really started here, and that's put a lot of my ideas on hold because we had to get through this crisis first. So much of what I would like to do has been put on the back burner, and I mean I realize why. We had to make sure that public services are maintained during this pandemic, and that comes first and foremost. A lot of people, this is a bad time for them. I understand. Many people in Lisbon are without jobs, or they're working fewer hours, making less money. They're having troubles making ends meet. We have our own issues. I mean, there's a lot of issues. It's difficult to think of where we're taking the community when you're just worried about making ends meet, making sure you have food on the table. So I mean, I think as the pandemic winds down, which I hope it is, sometimes I think we're not really, I think we're still in the middle of it rather than toward the end. That I think then certain initiatives I've proposed are going forward, and other ones I'm just waiting. You have to take baby steps. I've only been in office for 6 months, so I figured, you have to choose your battles wisely, and I want to work with council to get things done. And I hope that's what we're doing right now.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add? Because I know we could dive deeper into a lot, but I've got to condense this to about 1:30.
No. Good luck.